Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to address you again this year for the opening day of the SDGs Forum and the Cannes Lions Festival. My name is Jean d'Aragon, officer in charge of the United Nations Office for Global Development here in the Republic of Korea. To begin, I'd like to thank the organizers and all of you for taking part in this year's event. This is the second time I joined the SDGs Forum of the Cannes Lions in Seoul. Thank you for tuning in virtually. It's no secret that 2020 has been a year of setbacks, bringing us to a new normal. Before this year, we were already facing a wide array of challenges, with rising inequality, a climate crisis, and many other challenges. But as the COVID-19 pandemic set in and spread across the world, the challenges we face have grown exponentially. Is this our new normal, or just a bump on the road? To confront such challenges, our government came together as United Nations member states and crafted an agenda to set us on track to global progress. In 2015, 193 UN member states adopted the global agenda. The agenda is our roadmap to realize sustainable development by 2030. As the COVID-19 pandemic, it exposed our weaknesses of not achieving the SDGs. It exploited the gaps where countries had weak social protection or limited healthcare services. These areas are essentials of the 2030 agenda, and not achieving them have compounded the impact of the pandemic across so many homes in the world. Now we have only 10 years left to achieve the SDGs. But we're also in the middle of this global pandemic. And at the same time, we're facing its social economic impacts, while many of us are also facing typhoons, droughts, plagues of locusts destroying agriculture, and more. In a very short period of time, this has wiped out some of the progress made on the 17 goals of the global agenda. However, let us remember that without the SDGs as our global agenda, we would not be able to measure by how much we have gone forwards or backwards as a global society, and how much we need to accelerate the pace of recovery. The 2030 agenda is, therefore, still our global roadmap to recover and accelerate progress. Paragraph 23 of the 2030 agenda commits us to empower the most vulnerable groups whose needs are reflected in the agenda. Leaving no one behind is one central principle of the 2030 agenda. UN member states have defined these priority groups as children and youth, persons with disabilities, of whom more than 80% live in poverty, people with HIV/AIDS, older persons, indigenous people, refugees, internally displaced persons or IDPs, and migrants, including climate refugees and those displaced by disaster and rising seas, and people in areas affected by complex humanitarian emergencies, and in areas affected by terrorism and conflicts. It is impossible to ignore that these and other vulnerable groups are at most at risk today. Today, on the first day of the SDGs Forum, the focus is on leaving no one behind, especially reducing inequality and decent work for all. Before COVID-19, progress was actually not growing quickly enough in areas of access to education, reducing teachers' absenteeism, and more. With the pandemic, schools closures have kept 90% of all students from education, thus reversing years of progress. In addition, where students return to school even with masks, only 65% of primary schools have access to basic and washing facilities, which are so critical for a safe return to normal under the pandemic. Access to hand washing or water and sanitation facilities is essential in these times. Our office organized a webinar this June 10th on ensuring resilience and examining the impact of COVID-19 on the SDGs. A key statistic shared then was that women are on the front lines of the COVID-19 pandemic response, as they account for 70% of health and social workers. From Bangladesh to Costa Rica, women are engaged in reaching vulnerable households with support to recover from the pandemic. When it comes to SDGs 8, on promoting sustained, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth and full and productive employment and decent work for all, we know that all these areas have suffered in the past months. While the pace of global economic growth was already slowing down before the pandemic, its impacts on the global economic slowdown are continuing. The world faces the most economic declines since nearly 100 years ago with the depression of the 1930s. The Republic of Korea's response to the COVID-19 pandemic has been recognized by the UN as one such model that other countries can and should emulate. As many of you may know, the Republic of Korea has launched the Korean New Deal package that focuses on SDG 8 to spur economic growth and employment. The country's comprehensive policy response has amounted to nearly 270 trillion Korean won, or $228 billion US dollars, with the latest budget measures. The Korean New Deal also includes a focus on digital transformation to ensure a combined response to climate change, economic growth, social protection, and more in one package. These types of response measures that integrate and address the multiple and complex challenges we face today is what we need. We need response. We need responses that transform the system and aim for resilience. SDG 9 focuses on building resilient infrastructure, inclusive and sustainable industrialization and innovation. Tackling issues such as COVID-19 pandemic, the climate crisis, rising inequality, and major challenges we are seeing in population, in technology, while also achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, our shared vision for the future, will require global cooperation. This means cooperation with the private sector, a key partner for ingenuity, innovation, and growth. For the Decade of Action, the UN is collecting cases of actions from all sectors to ensure a unified approach in responding to COVID-19 and accelerating sustainable development. But only 9% of actions from the private sector have been registered thus far. However, we know that organizations like those here today can play a central role in creating decent employment, reducing inequality, providing essential services, and more to ensure we can achieve the SDGs by 2030. So, if I have only one key message for brand activism in the UN Decade of Action, it is never let a good crisis go to waste. In the words of Sir Winston Churchill over 70 years ago, the UN Secretary General has reminded us of the importance of activism in times of crisis. Everything we do, he said, during and after a crisis must be with strong focus on building more equal, inclusive, and sustainable economies and societies that are more resilient in the face of pandemics, climate change, and the many other global challenges we face. The purpose of the United Nations Office for Sustainable Development, or UNOSD, is to support UN member states in planning and implementing the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, including the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, through knowledge sharing, research, training, and partnerships. We look forward to hearing from you and your proposed actions to ensure we swiftly from recovery to achieving global goals together. Thank you, and my best wishes of good health to you all.
UN 지속가능발전센터인 UNOSD가 한국에 있다는 사실 여러분 알고 계셨나요? OSD는 UN 회원국들이 지속발전이 가능한 사회 환경으로 변환할 수 있도록 돕기 위해서 UN이 2011년에 인천 송도에 설립한 기관입니다. UNOSD는 정부와 대학, 시민단체 등을 교육하고 또 SDGs 관련 지식을 개발해 정책도 지원하고 있는데요. SDGs 목표 달성 연도인 2030년까지 이제 꼭 10년이 남았네요. SDGs 달성을 위한 UNOSD의 활동에 정부와 민간의 많은 참여와 노력 부탁드리겠습니다.